Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to episode 1 of the DC Universe Annotated podcast. Now on this episode, we'll go over the drama of Ray Fisher and WB, which is very interesting. Then the DC Universe relaunch details, including the HBO Max show renewals, new details on the Suicide Squad film directed by James Gunn, and last but not least, talk about the Batman resuming production in London. Now, if you're listening on YouTube, the first 3 segments are uploaded at 4 p.m., 6 p.m., and 8 p.m. Eastern Time, respectively, every Monday. So if you'd like to hear the full audio version, not broken up into segments, including the bonus 4th segment, follow the podcast on either Spotify or SoundCloud. Link should be in the video description, or just search DC Universe Annotated on either Spotify or SoundCloud respectively. It should easily appear, and those versions are published at noon Eastern Time, same day. And by same day, I mean Monday. So with all that said and done, let's get into the first topic here, which is Ray Fisher versus Warner Brothers and Geoff Johns. So I'm going to basically recap this whole situation, if you will, if you want to call it that. More or less, I'm going to start off as much as I can from the beginning of things all the way into the things that are most current, more or less, as of this past week. First and foremost, Ray Fisher says, there were some shenanigans going on set of Justice League once Joss Whedon took over directorial duties from Zack Snyder. And following these accusations of on-set misconduct, which still to this day, they haven't blatantly said what it was, there's just been this brewing war between Ray Fisher and Geoff Johns, Jon Berg, Joss Whedon, and more or less any exec at Warner Bros., including president of DC Films, Walter Hamada. Now, things got really nasty when Ray Fisher called out Walter Hamada, saying, after speaking out about Justice League, I received a call from the president of DC Films where he attempted to throw Joss Whedon and Jon Berg under the bus in hopes that I would relent on Geoff Johns. And, after that, Ray Fisher kept preaching about accountability over entertainment, etc., etc. Warner Brothers responded with a very lengthy statement, and I'm going to read it. I quote the following. In July, Ray Fisher's representatives asked DC Films president Walter Hamada to talk to Mr. Fisher about his concerns during the production of Justice League. The two had previously spoken when Mr. Hamada asked him to reprise his role as Cyborg in Warner Bros.' upcoming Flash movie, together with other members of the Justice League, which makes sense because they're going to do Flashpoint. So I guess it would make sense they want everyone in the Flash movie so they can neatly tie that bow and probably reset the canon, as theorized by a lot of places. But in their July conversation, Mr. Fisher recounted disagreements he had with the film's creative team regarding his portrayal of Cyborg, and complained that his suggested script revisions were not adopted. Mr. Hamada explained that creative differences are a normal part of the production process, and that a film's writer/director ultimately has to be in charge of these matters. Notably, Mr. Hamada also told Mr. Fisher that he would elevate his concerns to Warner Media so they could conduct an investigation. At no time did Mr. Hamada ever, quote-unquote, throw anyone under the bus, as Mr. Fisher has falsely claimed, or render any judgments about Justice League or about the Justice League production in which Mr. Hamada had no involvement with, since filming occurred before he was elevated to his current position. While Mr. Fisher never alleged any actual misconduct against him, Warner Media nonetheless initiated an investigation into the concerns he's raised about his character's portrayal. Still not satisfied, Mr. Fisher insisted that Warner Media hire an independent third-party investigator. This investigator has attempted multiple times to meet with Mr. Fisher to discuss his concerns, but to date, Mr. Fisher has declined to speak to the investigator. Warner Bros. Remains committed to accountability and to the well-being of every cast and crew member on each of its productions. It also remains committed to investigating any specific and credible allegation of misconduct, which thus far Mr. Fisher has failed to provide. That was really like the first kind of whoa moment, I guess you would say. After that, Ray Fisher responded to it, saying that they being WB, have escalated this to an entirely different level. He also says that Whedon's on-set treatment of the cast and crew of Justice League was gross, abusive, unprofessional, and completely unacceptable. Later accusing Geoff Johns and Jon Berg of enabling this behavior, which I just gotta say, off the narrative path really quick that this is kind of not ironic, but just I can't help but laugh a little bit. Out of all the actors to bring something like this forward, it's Ray Fisher, who plays Cyborg, against Geoff Johns, who is the one that introduced Cyborg as a member of the Justice League when they did New 52. I mean, I just think it's kind of ironic in a way that Geoff Johns has kind of unintentionally created this whole situation for himself by introducing a Cyborg as a Justice League member. But anyways, Ray Fisher goes on to talk about how he's having issues talking with Warner Brothers Pictures because instead of Warner Media, an investigator on the case, the investigator was actually hired by Warner Bros. Pictures. So anything brought up would go directly to them instead of Warner Media. Basically, that was a whole issue, and Ray Fisher is trying to protect himself by making sure when he's talking to whether it's Warner Bros. Pictures or this investigator that he has another person on his team on the line because, a lot of times, I guess, Warner Bros. Pictures, he was saying they would have someone on their end on the line, but not tell Ray Fisher necessarily. As he puts it, he also had another person on the line as a witness, which we weren't made aware of. I told him I needed to have a rep on the line as security for myself. And then they tried keeping him on the line, but he said basically that this wouldn't work and he needs to talk to his team. So this just keeps going and going and going. Ray Fisher says as well that this whole thing is a sad and desperate game by the studio, and that he has a lot of receipts about interactions they've had. While it's a sad and desperate game, it's a predictable one. Walter Hamada's excuse for the whole situation with Geoff Johns, at least, is saying that he worked with Geoff Johns on the Shazam movie, doesn't really think Geoff Johns would do or say the things that Ray Fisher is saying. But Ray Fisher says, you weren't there when Geoff Johns used back-channel communication to call me into his office, make a veiled threat to my career, or basically when Geoff Johns contacted Fisher in 2018, a year and a half after Justice League, while Fisher was shooting True Detective, to essentially gloat that there was another Cyborg being used in the DC Universe in a show that Geoff Johns was producing. So, I mean, a lot of this sounds really petty, to be honest, from both sides. Honestly, if Geoff Johns did that, I mean, come on, that's really petty. But since then, Kiersey Clemons, who plays Iris West in Justice League and presumably also in the upcoming Flash movie, alongside of Jason Momoa, who plays Aquaman, they both posted to their Instagrams respectively stating support for Ray Fisher and his side of events. According to both Jason Momoa and Ray Fisher, used a fake Frosty the Snowman announcement and also leaked Ben Affleck's return as Batman to distract fan attention from what's going on. Now, also at the same time, there was a conveniently released article that basically said Ray Fisher only started this whole, allegation stuff after being offered a small cameo role as the Flash in the not as the Flash, but as Cyborg in the Flash movie, which they say from that point, one thing, led to another. And all of a sudden, after the studio did not hear back from Fisher's team since offering the role, these allegations came out. Even though it doesn't really make sense, it's not like it would make what Ray Fisher said any less valid, just because what he's saying is things happened on the set of Justice League, not anything abstract, like, regarding this role. Ray Fisher responded saying, due to the purposeful lack of transparency and lies on the part of WB Pictures and a third-party firm hired by them to investigate Justice League, an official request for a change of investigator has been made to Warner Media so as to protect the witnesses involved and the information they possess. I strongly encourage any and all that have been contacted by the current investigator to respectfully decline to interview until a truly independent third party is engaged by Warner Media. And that is the last of the last updates. I think it's safe to say that I don't expect to see Ray Fisher in any WB or Geoff Johns produced projects coming up soon. And again, like I said before, I just think it's kind of ironic that Geoff Johns is having this, not him alone, but he is a part of what is being, I guess, called out for these, allegations, if you will, of things we don't fully know yet, but I guess just terrible stuff that happened on set. I mean, I think it's interesting that this is happening from the actor playing the character of Cyborg that is only in Justice League, because Geoff Johns wrote Cyborg as a founding member in the New 52 for Justice League. I mean, I just can't get over it's like George Lucas, you know what I mean? Like poetry, like it rhymes, you know what I mean? Like it's just everything coming full circle here, at least for Geoff Johns. Now, I understand some of what Ray Fisher is saying in terms of, things being changed up. And if you go back to the earlier things being said, he talks about how a lot of his suggestions for the character were basically ignored. And I can see the frustration he's coming from there, because he has said multiple times that when Zack Snyder brought him on to play Cyborg, part of what also happened was that Zack Snyder brought him kind of, as you would say, like a seat to the table in terms of really outlining and defining what Cyborg's character in Justice League and in the DC Extended Universe would be like, in terms of, what is his relationship with his father, his mother, what are his motivations, what is his character arc going to be like. But these are all things Ray Fisher on the record has said before was something he worked on with Zack Snyder. So I can see why he would feel slighted when, after presumably all that research and hard work to create this character, new director comes in, new producer comes in, all of a sudden, they just dismiss everything. I mean, I can understand that. At the same time, I can understand somewhat, Joss Whedon's perspective on things and Geoff Johns' perspective on things, potentially, in terms of, you're under a tight studio mandate. Millions of dollars are in this project. Hundreds of millions of dollars are on the line. Jobs are probably on the line, including yours, if this is a huge bomb. You got to do what the studio says. Whether that makes the actors happy or not, at the end of the day, even though you can say it's up to the writers and you can say it's up to the producers and up to the directors, it's really up to those who have the money, which are the execs. And that is a never-ending battle between the creatives and the executives for film productions. I know Christopher Nolan has said that he considers it just a part of the process, that tension, but I can understand why that would be something that is a foundational element of Ray Fisher's issue with WB. However, at a certain point, I'm guessing maybe it's due to NDAs. Maybe due to NDAs, but you gotta speak out, man. You gotta say what actually is going on here. If it's to the point where Kirstie Clemons and Jason Momoa are talking about it, come on. Henry Cavill, Ben Affleck, Gal Gadot, speak up. Supposedly, Gal Gadot was so unhappy with some of the reshooting things that Joss Whedon was ordering that they had her stunt double do it. And then they just CGI'd Gal Gadot's face basically onto those scenes. Like, I think the scene of basically the Flash falling on Wonder Woman, and it's supposed to be like a physical comedy moment with a sexual innuendo or something like that. Gal Gadot was not a part of that whatsoever. They had her stunt double do it. Supposedly that's why a lot of the reshot scenes, I should say, with Gal Gadot, it features like over the shoulder, from behind kind of stuff. So you don't really tell that it's not Gal Gadot. Can't tell basically who it is, whether it's her or stunt double. So reportedly, that is the history behind that. So if it's really that bad, just speak out at this point. Now more than ever, we're in an era of the entertainers being empowered more so than the studios with social media and everything else. So if something truly bad was happening behind the scenes, no one's going to crucify you for saying it. The execs might try making you not have a job, but if you're Ben Affleck and you're Gal Gadot, they can only keep you from being in a film for so long because you're already an international star. Ray Fisher is kind of a different situation because he's obviously not at the same level of a Ben Affleck or a Gal Gadot or a Henry Cavill, but I'm sure at the same time, this is one of those moments where you need your bigger cast members to really join your side. That's really kind of my thoughts on that. I hope they get this resolved soon because it's never nice when things like this, when things are ugly and they're brought to light. So I hope they can get things fixed up sooner rather than later. And yeah, that's really it for this topic. All right, so for the second topic here, we have DC Universe is relaunching, and HBO Max is now taking on a lot of the DC Universe shows, basically all of them, and renewing them as HBO Max shows instead. So after a lot of leaks, multiple signs basically pointing to the demise of DC Universe as we know it, WB finally just announced it that the series, or not series, but the streaming service is going to be rebranded into a comics-only digital platform, relaunching as DC Universe Infinite on January 21st, 2021. Now, new comics will be available 6 months after their on-sale date. Early access will be granted for DC Comics digital first series, such as Injustice Zero Year. And Jim Lee, publisher and CCO over there, said the following: "Our fans love the platform's robust library of comic books, and with this transformation, we will not disappoint. I'm excited to share that not only will DC Universe Infinite members still be able to read all of the great comics that they've enjoyed, but new issues are debuting on the platform quicker than before. Digital first exclusives are being created, and member-only events will begin as soon as possible. This service, DC Universe Infinite, will cost about $8 a month or $75 a year if you go the annual amount, which I think is like $650, $675 a month, something like that. My thoughts on it is I really don't like the name DC Universe Infinite. Sorry, it's just a little much. I don't like the trend that's been going on where they just do like a plus at the end of everything, like they're doing a Paramount Plus, they have a Disney Plus. I'm sure if they could, they would do a HBO Plus because they have HBO Go, HBO Max, HBO Now. With DC, I'd rather them just do like a DC Comics Plus. Honestly, I mean, DC Universe Infinite, it just sounds a lot. Or just do DC Universe still. Relaunch the service as a comics-only digital platform. I just don't think it's necessary to have such a long name. It's kind of confusing. The video content for series such as Harley Quinn, Young Justice, Doom Patrol, and Titans will move onto HBO Max. And HBO Max announced actually this past week that they have renewed Harley Quinn, Titans, and Doom Patrol for season 3, and Young Justice has been renewed for a season 4. Now, what changes HBO Max might bring to these series, I have no idea. They haven't announced anything yet outside of the fact that they were renewed. The cool thing though for Titans is that I know overseas, outside of the States, it actually was a Netflix series, I believe, distribution-wise. They're not doing that anymore. It's just going to be purely HBO Max going forward. So that's something people have to look forward to, I guess. Now, in terms of the HBO Max shows, I hope they do well. I mean, HBO Max has been dying for some content to really help prop the platform further. I mean, they got smart, I think, with releasing Lovecraft Country same day on HBO Max to really drive usage of it for those that are maybe on HBO Max but not really watching the HBO channel. So I think they're adjusting to it and learning how to best use this new weapon in their arsenal. But yeah, I'm a little disappointed to hear that DC Universe is kind of faltering like this. I guess you could have seen it coming from a mile away, but it's just one of those situations where I really feel for everyone that was a huge DC fan and purchased DC Universe from the get-go. And basically, I mean, they got some good content from it for sure, but it's just that investment in the DC Universe service really didn't last that long, all things considered, for the most part. So I hope this new DC Universe Infinite platform is successful, but I'm not going to be a part of it probably. I'm just going to stick with HBO Max and just, kind of take it from there and wish for the best going forward. So getting into our third topic here. So the Suicide Squad, during an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Joel Kinnaman, who is the actor playing Rick Flag, he describes the movie as extremely hilarious and likely to be a hard R, which will be really interesting to see actually come to fruition here. But just in this interview, I'm going to read some of the quotes he said before adding some commentary. So he says, "The movie is going to be insane. The script is so funny. Every page of that script is funny. Every page made me laugh. James Gunn just has command of that genre, of every aspect of the comedy, even the marketing. And he just understands the world so well. And since he wrote it, he really reinvents not only the concepts, but also the characters. For me, it was like I did my first comedy film, but it's likely heavily R-rated. So much of the action is practical with real explosions. And yeah, the movie's going to be insane. It's such a great cast that he put together. John Cena, that dude is a comedic genius. No one would make us laugh on set more than John Cena. Every scene he was in, he would go on an improvised tangent. And there were so many chops in that cast, and James just has command of it all. We had so much fun doing the film. The movie is going to be an effing monster. Honestly, even though I'm in it, I can't wait to see it as a fan. When I got the script sent to me, like every page made me laugh. I was sitting at home reading it, laughing out loud. We had a great time shooting the first one, but this one was really something special, which is saying something because the last one was so special to everyone in it. They got a squad tattoo. But I've never done a comedy before, and this felt like my first comedy. And I think in the first Suicide Squad, I'm not disappointed with my work there, but I never really played around with it. I felt like I had these parameters that confined me in a way. So it was a great feeling to do the second one because James really opened up the possibilities for the character. and it became much more comedic. And he really taught me how to find the comedy and where the opportunities for that was. And so it was a great learning experience. It was really fun. Both me and James, I think we had a great time working with each other. And he concludes by saying, I think it's going to be so good. And everything I've heard, the studio is over the moon about the film. WB basically had very few notes and almost no notes on the director's cut, which is usually unheard of on a big movie. And James Gunn also in a separate interview, or not really interview, but a tweet, revealed that the only role in the film, like major role for the film, was Bloodsport in terms of it being specifically written for the actor playing it, which is Idris Elba. Even though I feel like you can't really say that for the roles played by returning characters, because obviously you're writing them with those actors already in mind, like Viola Davis for Waller and Harley Quinn played by Margot Robbie. You already know who's going to be playing those roles, so there's no way that you're writing the character, not intending to write it for those actresses and actors respectively. But the one thing I find interesting is how much they talk about how funny it is and how it's such a special time, just because of how much they hyped the experience of filming the first one, outside of Jared Leto's shenanigans, if you want to call it that, with his weird portrayal of the Joker in terms of sending people dead rats and used condoms and stuff like that. Something that will be interesting to see here is how much of the tone is organic James Gunn and how much is organic James Gunn, but also a little synthetic from the studio. Because the first Suicide Squad, it was fairly obvious after the success of Guardians of the Galaxy, they really wanted to make Suicide Squad 1 basically a Guardians of the Galaxy kind of like a wannabe. They really forced in there the soundtrack aspect of it. They really forced in there some more comedy, brighter aspects like with different color palettes and just, there's a huge difference between what David Ayer seemingly pitched and filmed and wrote initially and what was dictated by the studio for reshoots, later on marketing wise. I really do feel bad for a lot of the people that were involved with the first Suicide Squad film, just because what they set out to make was taken out of their hands and turned into something else. And while I don't doubt David Ayer made the best of his film, you can't deny, when the original film's plot was basically centered around the Suicide Squad trying to prevent Enchantress from opening a boom tube that allowed parademons and Steppenwolf to come to Earth. That was the plot. You know what I mean? Instead of those weird blobby henchmen things that were running around for Incubus and Enchantress, those henchmen goon things in Suicide Squad were supposed to be parademons. Instead of it being like Enchantress's brother or whatever, it was supposed to be Steppenwolf. Which makes me think also, was Enchantress supposed to be retconned in the DC films as a new god or related to the new gods of Apocalypse? That'd be really interesting to get confirmation on when I think about it. But my whole point is, I just hope this film from beginning to end, from the first word and dot written by James Gunn on the script, in the draft of the script, from that moment to it being released in theaters, I hope we don't have a situation that has happened with films like the Justice League movie and what has happened with David Ayer's Suicide Squad. I just hope we get what the director actually wrote for and what James Gunn is actually envisioning. And I feel like we don't have to worry about that, because what are the odds that the first Suicide Squad would be Frankensteined into being a pseudo Guardians of the Galaxy, basically, for DC. And then, falling right into their lap, is James Gunn able to do the next Suicide Squad movie. It's like a Cinderella story for Warner Bros. In a lot of sense. But, that's really my thoughts on it. I just really hope the movie we get is the movie that the director and the writing team and the producers from the get-go, not what the execs reactively are wanting it to be. That's really my thoughts on that and this topic in general. Now, the fourth and last topic for this episode of the DC Universe Annotated podcast, we're just going to touch upon the Batman resuming production, basically. Now, in late 2020, August, reports came out that a crew member for the Batman over there in London tested positive for COVID-19, which was kind of like a scary big deal since productions were already implementing all these restrictions and regulations, and some productions stopped production, some stopped and are starting again. Initially, it was believed to be a situation where production could still continue, but just on a limited basis. Unfortunately, that ended up not being true, since the member of the production that got COVID was actually lead actor Robert Pattinson, who is playing Bruce Wayne / the Batman respectively. As of September 17th, it appears that Robert Pattinson successfully completed his quarantine and whatever required COVID-19 protocols were needed of him, because production was announced to resume, and he was also spotted around London publicly hanging out with his girlfriend. So, assuming he didn't just make it up so he'd have some off days to hang out with his girlfriend, it seems that Robert Pattinson is no longer sick with COVID, which is great for him. I'm happy he made it through. I mean, a lot of people have died from it. A lot of people have gotten terribly sick from it. I mean, my roommate had it, and he basically, instead of it like being like a 2-week thing and he's good, he had it for basically like a month. Like the entire month of, what was it, May or something like that? He was basically in his room, quarantined, coughing all the time, just super sick. You know, I really just hope Robert Pattinson is good. Now, the film takes place during the second year of Bruce Wayne's kind of war against crime in Gotham City, and the primary antagonist has been marketed as the Riddler, while the secondary antagonist is believed to be both the Penguin and Carmine Falcone. I'm curious to see what's going to happen with this film, because the trailer was pretty great, I think. Honestly, it showed us what we can expect from this Batman physically. It gave us a good sense of the tone for this film. We got to see Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner Gordon as well, which was pretty great because, I mean, that dude's just awesome and everything he's in. So all in all, I mean, I'm not expecting this movie to be bad by any means. I don't mean to make it seem like that. So I'm really excited just for what they're going to do with the Batman when it comes out in 2021, assuming it's still able to come out in 2021, and it's not further delayed. But leave your comments down below about the Batman. Are you excited for the Batman? What do you hope they do in this movie? Whether it's laying the traps for maybe a trilogy-wide villain, like let's say the Court of Owls being the all-encompassing villain behind the scenes throughout the entire trilogy. Would you like to see that? Or would you like to see maybe a reinterpretation of a villain we've gotten before? Whether it's the Joker, whether it's Bane, I guess Scarecrow maybe, Two-Face. I mean, leave your comments down below about that. Yeah, so that's kind of it for this episode. Thanks for watching or listening, I guess, potentially, depending on what platform you're on right now, of the DC Universe Annotated podcast. Again, if you're listening on YouTube, the first 3 segments are uploaded at 4, 6, and 8 p.m. Eastern Time every Monday. However, if you're wanting to hear just the full audio version with the bonus 4th segment, not split up into different video segments, just listen to the podcast, follow it on Spotify and SoundCloud. Links are in the description, or just search DC Universe Annotated on Spotify or SoundCloud respectively, and those versions publish at noon Eastern Time, same day / Monday. So check it out. Let me know what you guys think about this episode down below in the comments, and I'll show you guys later.